Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. Well, it's that time of the week again. It's Saturday, and that means it's thumbs ups and thumbs down. So the world is trembling with trepidation. With me, of course, is Peter Lavelle, co-founder of The Gaggle, host of RT's talk show Crosstalk. All right, I'll go with one of my thumbs ups. It may be something that you were thinking of, but I've also have a backup. The pardon of General Flynn. We talked about it earlier this week. Clearly, this was a good thing to do. It was a massive injustice that was perpetrated against General Flynn, a three-star general. It was clear that that the FBI was out to get him, both because they were out to get Donald Trump and to sabotage his administration, sabotage his policy toward Russia. But I think they were also very anxious because Flynn was already kind of suspicious about what the Obama administration was up to. And I think you, Peter, mentioned a week or so ago the interview between Aaron Mate and Rick Gates, in which Gates disclosed that candidate Trump, when he was getting the intelligence briefings, in attendance was Michael Flynn, and Flynn actually said afterwards that there's something funny going on here. There's something wrong here. I thought that's extremely revealing, and it's clear that the Obama people knew that Flynn would very quickly realize that there was something very serious, mischievous activities that were the Obama.
And to add to that, and the tail end of that, it's connected to it, is that if Flynn had survived his National Security Council advisor, number one, he would have tried to figure out why those briefings were fishy, and then he would have come across everything that the DOJ and the FBI was doing. A 30-year veteran, he would say he would be able to connect it, that fast. This now it makes sense why these briefings were the way.
And he's an intelligence pro. I mean, he was head of the Defense Intelligence Agencies. In other words, he knows exactly what intelligence is all about. So when he gets an intelligence briefing and he says, "There's something wrong here, something fishy going on. Either we're being set up by the FBI, or they're actually spying on you, using these briefings in to spy on you," which of course they were. And I think that's why the Obama people were so anxious to take him out. With the famous January the 5th meeting, when they say, "Well, maybe we can bring up the Logan Act. We can take him out like that." So a terrible injustice was perpetrated against Flynn, and that has been in part righted.
And there is evidence to believe one of the reasons why Flynn was such an important target for the outgoing administration is that Flynn had some ideas about reorganizing the intelligence community and to fit presumably Donald Trump's vision of foreign policy for the United States. I don't know to what degree we'll know how much Flynn influenced him. And he was very early on as a Trump supporter, and Trump liked what he had to say. But again, having such a long career in the intelligence community, quote unquote, let's put it this way, he knew where all the bodies were buried, and he knew where the bottlenecks were, who the careerists were, the Vindmans of the world, where they were, yeah. and to pull out those bottlenecks, which of course he wasn't able to do because he was treated so terribly. And you're right. I mean, it took a long time, but justice has finally arrived. I mean, for me, I'm not a big fan of the intelligence community, as you know, and you're not either. But to see someone's life like that turned around upside down and inside out for a political stratagem, I mean, it shows the ruthlessness of these people and the ruthlessness that we can expect.
Right. All right. No, I think just to follow up on that, it's like, and that's what happens in dictatorial, authoritarian, totalitarian countries. The intelligence service becomes so powerful that politicians, the political leaders themselves, live in dread as to what the intelligence agencies have on them. I mean, it's kind of what happened in the Soviet Union as well. KGB becomes so powerful that senior figures in the Politburo were terrified about what they had on them. So
it's very much like J. Edgar Hoover
Right.
when he would go in front of Congress, the congressional committees, on getting more funding for the FBI. And it was very famous what he would do. Let's say there were 13 members on the committee, and he would come in and he would sit down, and his assistants would give him 13 thick files, and he would put them on the table. And so, oh, Congressman Smith, yes. And he would just put it there, and he would open the first cover, and then, it just looks straight into his eyes. And it's basically, this is you.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Now they just do it electronically, but it's the same thing. Okay. Showing that the intelligence community can intimidate and get their way with elected officials, which it seems to me that we had a bit of an interruption, but it seems like they're back in.
Back. That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, I think that's one of the great features of the Trump era, is that we found out what we had always suspected.
Yes.
I mean, here's Comey. I mean, can you just imagine that Comey goes off to talk to the president-elect in order to entrap him? And then he rushes down to his car, and already the laptop is there so that he can write his memo. And all of it is with a view to proving this case that Trump is somehow working for Putin. I mean,
and Rosenstein and the whole conversation about invoking the 25th Amendment with a wire.
Right.
Okay. I mean, and more than one person has said that. And Rosenstein said it was a joke, a real joke. Yeah, You're joking about wiring up the president of the United States. I can't see under any conditions that that's funny.
No, exactly. No, that's right. You talk like that.
You bring up such a good point, because, between WikiLeaks and the things that Trump told us during his administration, confirms all of the worst fears that we have had in our community about the power of the intelligence community and to what lengths they will go. They will go to lengths to overturn the election of the president of the United States. I mean, before all this, we would have thought this is kind of like, Hollywood screenplays.
That's right, Hollywood, exactly. Hollywood
13 days in May, was it? Or what's it?
7 days in May.
7 days. Okay.
13 days. Yeah, 13 days is Robert Kennedy's title of Robert Kennedy's book about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay, my thumbs down is the reception of the liberal corporate media of Biden's foreign policy team. One talking head, it doesn't matter which cable station it was, called them the Avengers, okay? And that woman over at PBS saying, these are apolitical people. I couldn't, it was just, it's like, what are you smoking, lady? They're all intensely political. That's why they're there, okay? I mean, and these people are dangerous. They have resumes that are publicly known. And then I saw a bit of the back and forth on Twitter, and he's like, Tony Blinken, he's the father of 2 children.
Well,
father of 2 young children. That makes, a warmonger, is that warmonger light?
And he plays the guitar. Don't forget, he also plays the guitar.
Apparently he has 2 singles too.
Yes.
But I mean, the lavish reception of them was just utterly disgusting. I think it was a couple of days ago when, it was when Biden gave his Thanksgiving greeting. It was incoherent. And then he was interviewed on NBC, and again, the synapses kind of breaking down. And I don't take any joy in saying that, okay? But it is what it is. And the media, like they gave 8 years of cover to Obama, they're doing it. This bad habit is coming back. And you have to put, you have to challenge power. I mean, if you don't, then people are going to have to think of other things. And, there are conspiracy theories out there, but if you're not given facts that you can determine are true or not, people are going to go their own way, try to understand things. So it's the media is completely culpable and responsible for their irresponsibility in treating the Biden orbit. And, again, I mean, if I was Lester Holt, I would I would ask, I mean, do you know anything about the FBI in possession of your son's laptop? This is a topical story. It was in the news.
Right.
Would you care to comment? Nothing like that. And then juxtapose the same day, Trump is meeting with the media, and all he got was a barrage of innuendos and quite snotty questions from
Very,
the.
very nasty. And that's why I think when Trump kind of this is, I think, the first time I'd actually heard him really blow up at a reporter when he said, "Don't you dare talk like that to the president of the United States." To be honest, I actually think he should have said that earlier. Who the hell are you to talk like that to the president of the United States? Fine, challenge me, ask aggressive questions, but don't just talk to me as if I'm some Joe Schmo in a bar somewhere and you can address me.
What happened to the norms, George? What about the norms we keep being told about?
Yeah, exactly. So that the contrast is absolutely right. And of course, there was a breaking story yesterday that the Biden household is getting a cat. So that's news, an important news.
I guess it's a step up from socks.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean, that's very interesting what you said about the apolitical. Now, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, was one of the key figures in promoting the Russiagate hoax. When he testified before the House Intelligence Committee, he put out every kind of nonsense about Michael Flynn, that Michael Flynn was colluding with the Russians, and that Michael Flynn was telling the Kislyak that the Trump administration was going to reverse the Obama administration's policy towards Russia. None of that was true. So he was putting out all of these lies about the collusion with the Russians and everything else. So the idea of describing this creature as apolitical is a joke. Blinken, I mean, we have the record. He was a key figure in the bombing of Yugoslavia. His job was at National Security Council. He was responsible for European affairs at the National Security Council in 1999 during the bombing. He was a very important promoter of the bombing of Libya. This is a very political creature. And the idea of just simply giving these people a pass and doing this nonsense, well, these people are foreign policy pros. Well, these are the pros. Give me amateurs any day. We can do without this kind of professionalism.
Yeah, and just the lack of any kind of curiosity of examining their background. I mean, they have they're credentialed and their experience, but they never say what their experience is. Okay, it's just that they're professional, managerial. I guess if we could hear a page from Joe Biden, they're clean, and he describes a politician. What I'm really worried about is that because there were no issues in this campaign at all. It was all about personality and tweets and masks. And the public has been sold a bill of goods that was rejected in 2016. And so, I mean, what are they going to do? Are we going to have these false flags and get Syria all wound up again? And but to what end? I mean, what is their purpose? And they have to make that very clear for people like us to understand what's going on. I would prefer, I've said this many, many times, is that tell me the truth. I may still be angry with you, and I will probably disagree with you, but don't lie to me. We're doing it to save the Kurds. We're saving it for literacy of 6-year-olds. Don't lie to me. Tell me what you want.
That's right. But in this case, they didn't even say that. Their line was, well, we're not going to tell you anything. We're just saying we're not Trump. Trump is responsible for 250,000 deaths. He personally is responsible for 250,000 deaths. And we're going to impose masks on everyone. That's it. And the media were happy and just went on shouting their idiotic gotcha questions to Trump. And that was the election. I mean, I think it's one of the worst elections in my lifetime. I mean, I don't remember any election.
I wouldn't even call it.
Of any issues.
Yeah, I suppose there was an election, but there was no campaign.
What were the issues? I mean, what? I mean, there has to be some issues that. I mean, there were none.
And
Because,
particularly,
well, we're not Trump. We're not going to murder 250,000 people.
okay, and we can look at issues that may necessarily not been on top of the ticket, but in this election cycle, minimum wage was on the ballot in some states, in Florida particularly, affirmative action, like in California. But always, foreign policy isn't on the agenda. And for me, that is a bipartisan thing. You get this usual, genuflecting to Israel, and Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, which it's not. And you'll get these, and we need to have a strong allies, but it's not defined what that means here. And particularly since Trump had gone out and made it very clear his preferences, many in the GOP didn't feel that way. So for me, when the cabinet officials that have to be approved by the Senate, for Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, I think it'll be smooth going, unfortunately.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, but it's
Because,
very interesting what you said about the foreign policy, because Trump should have been vulnerable on foreign policy, because his foreign policy achievements were minuscule. The only thing he could ever tout was that he served Israel's interests. Anything Israel wanted, he signed off on. But the Democrat critique was this inane thing of, well, he was Putin's best friend. He was doing everything that Putin wanted. An absolutely imbecilic.
there's no evidence of that.
None. And so then, Trump would respond boasting, well, look at all the terrible things that I did to Russia, which I suppose is the only way he can respond to that. But, that's a foreign policy accomplishment. No arms control agreement. You're selling lethal weapons to Ukraine. In other words, you're fueling a war that should be brought to an end.
Trying to sideline Russia's foreign energy interests and
Right.
trade with the Nord Stream, for example, lethal weapons to Ukraine.
Right.
I mean, these are all things that gives Moscow a headache. Okay,
Right.
but no, I mean, and we heard it even. We heard it. Joe Biden even said that. I mean, I'm not going to quote him, but basically doing Putin's bidding during the debate, all the way through.
That's it. And they trotted out that old, ridiculous, idiotic nonsense of, there's a bounty on the heads of American servicemen by Putin, and Trump hasn't done anything about it. He hasn't even addressed the issue with Putin. I mean, it's cretinous. And again, it shows the imbecility of our media, the laziness, stupidity of the media, that they never challenge. And they say, Mr. Biden, we have now had many newspaper reports quoting American generals saying that they found no evidence of these bounties. No one just said, and they just report it completely. The fact checkers are apparently, they're on vacation until Trump says something.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens if one of these conflicts is reignited, particularly Syria. The public is not going to like it. There is, irrespective of how weak and stupid some of the polling has been recently, it's consistent that, and it's across party lines. Voters are tired of these wars here. I'm going to be very curious in how the media, not the administration, but how the media will sell it, because the administration knows that the media will sell it for them. They'll do the heavy lifting. Okay. And they'll get the, like Max booed out and these people like this. I mean, oh my God.
Well, it kind of leads me into my thumbs down, and that is the assassination of an Iranian nuclear scientist. Israel clearly was involved. The extent of U.S. involvement is unclear at the moment. Clearly, Trump had signed off on it because he retweeted a variety of news reports about this assassination, so indicating at the very least approval rather than disapproval. Obviously, assassination is clearly a violation of international law. Iran has no nuclear weapons program. We know Iran has no nuclear weapons. No, even the CIA has said there's no nuclear weapons.
The United States is not
Again,
at war with Iran.
yeah, exactly. So this was an absolute, insult, unprovoked attack by Israel. And for all the talk about, oh, Biden's going to return to the JCPOA, complete silence from Biden. No comment, no criticism, no condemnation, a complete silence. He sends out tweets with his banalities and platitudes about how we must fight COVID, has nothing to say on this. It's a disgrace.
Yep. And the if Biden, the potential Biden administration thinks they're going to find some kind of diplomatic victory with Iran, they better think twice, okay? Because all of the conditionality they want to put on it, it's not going to go anywhere, okay? And on top of it, I think the reaching out to our European allies, they're fed up with this, the U.S. position in dealing with Iran, because and dealing with Iran in this agreement that we had in 2015, it was a good agreement considering the circumstances, okay? And you and I are no cheerleaders for Obama, okay? But balls and strikes. I like the idea of my biggest regret was that it wasn't the start of something.
Right.
It was the end.
That was exactly, and that was Obama's major failure, because if you don't bring it as part of a package of rapprochement, then the next man in is just going to walk away. And it was already built into the JCPOA. I mean, it was the expectation that the United States would eventually walk away from it. I mean, it was built in. It's actually there in the agreement. So that's what happened. And so, yeah, now going back, and the Europeans have said, yeah, okay, so even if Biden were to sign on, and that isn't going to happen, but even if he were, what's the guarantee that the next president, the next man in, isn't going to walk away again? Whether it's Trump or Ted Cruz or Tom Cotton or whatever, they're going to walk away from it.
As the Russians say, agreement incapable.
Right.
Okay, and this is what's happened here. And it'll be very interesting how much leeway these foreign policy advisors are going to be given to Biden, because it's interesting, as you say, is that with this assassination, Biden has nothing to say. Okay, he's getting these briefings every single day. All right, and so what is his position here? They don't have a position. They don't know what they're going to do. All right, and this wanting to come out and be the great diplomat. I mean, if I were Tehran, I would just say, you really got to show me something to show me you're serious. Like, get rid of all sanctions, no preconditions, drop all the sanctions, and then we can talk.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly that would be Iran's position. Exactly. You drop the sanctions, and then we're going to talk. But the idea is like, well, you have to come into compliance. No, to the extent that we're not in compliance is because of the sanctions.
Because you're not in it. How can you tell Iran to be in compliance when you're not in part of the agreement anymore?
And then they're going to start imposing, hey, you got to get out of Syria. You got to end your ballistic missiles program. It's not going to happen. Why should Iran sign on to a worse deal when America didn't even live up to a better deal?
A little bit of history here. Look at Gaddafi. He did essentially everything they wanted, and the Iranians know that. They know that. So Iran changes its position on what was it? I think Pompeo had 13 or 12. I mean, I think I'm not sure if he was doing a Moses imitation here, but it was quite a few of them. And that means once you do all those things, then we can talk. That's not going to happen here. What's really happened since the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq is that Iran has only expanded its influence around the region and the world. See, the American public is sold this ridiculous story that Iran is completely isolated. No, it's not.
No.
Okay, and it actually has very good relations with many countries around the world. And I would agree that the economy has taken a toll, but they have actually been able to provide for themselves. Okay,
I think that's a very good point, because it's like America is in a time warp. 40 years ago, after the Khomeini revolution, Iran was isolated. Iran was isolated from America, Western Europe. It was isolated from the Soviet Union. I mean, Iran had very bad relations with the Soviet Union. Khomeini was making all sorts of claims on territory
The
within the
second
Soviet Union.
Satan.
Yeah, they have poor relations. Now Iran is not isolated. Iran has very good relations with Russia, has very good relations with China. So any economic pressure America applies, there are ways around it, because Russia and China are quite happy to help out Iran.
Exactly, and because of the indecision that's come out of Washington, with the exception of always being the great protector of Israel, the Middle East is changing immensely. So many people don't understand is that if it hadn't been for Western backing of Al Qaeda and Al Qaeda like factions in Syria, Syria never the Assad government never would have gotten the kind of military hardware it did from Russia. And what is one of the things that's happened is that Israel has lost the commanding heights of the sky, because now a country like Syria has the weaponry it needs to protect itself, and ergo that's going to be also flowing into Lebanon. I mean, all this time warp that you mentioned is so absolutely right. It doesn't acknowledge all of the changes that are going on, the instability of Saudi Arabia, potential insolvency in the near future here. The place has been run so badly over the last few decades. So, I mean, when we have these foreign policy gurus in, I hope you're looking at 2000, 2001, I'm sorry, 2020 and 2021, and not 1991. And that's essentially their worldview.
That's right. I agree. So you have a thumbs
Well, I
down?
was going to do the Flynn thing, so we agreed on that one.
Okay. But you have any other thumbs down?
Everything's a thumbs down. I mean, really.
Right. Well, I think that, I mean, you mentioned that press conference with Trump. I think that's very much a thumbs down, because you really get a sense that the media are really a disgrace. I mean, it's the idea of not just talking in this way. I mean, to pretend, as the media do, that nobody has ever challenged election results before. Nobody has attempted to sway electors before the Electoral College meeting. This was happening in 2016. I mean, it's 2016. There's a record of it, that there was an attempt to sway the electors so that Hillary Clinton would win. That these electors.
Every broadsheet, The Nation, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the New Wall Street Journal, they were all saying, that was one of the strategies that they wanted to impose. Right. Yeah, absolutely, going after the electors, and then would they have amnesia? I mean,
exactly. It's only 4 years ago. We don't have to go back to 1960. Just 4 years ago, there was an attempt to sway the electors and to get them to vote for Hillary Clinton. And the media just, nobody has ever done anything like this before. Oh God, nobody has ever demanded recounts. Well, there were recounts in 2016. The 3 key states that Trump won, there were recounts. And that was the Democrats who basically bankrolled the Green Party's attempt for a recount. That's what they were hoping for. They get a recount and then and therefore sway the election. Oh well, it never happened before.
But the interesting thing for me, I mean, this will be maybe one of the ultimate thumbs down or thumbs up in our lifetime, George. I mean, there will be forensic studies of this general election. Yes. Okay. And I'm not making any claims here. I'm not making any allegations either. But one thing I can say that is irrefutable, there were a lot of ballots floating around this time. Okay. States sending out ballots in mass without checking their voter rolls. And I won't go through all of the cases here, but I mean, just think about it. I mean, you could make the claim that, that's good voter turnout. No, it's not. It's ballot turnout. It's not necessarily voter turnout. And that's, I misinterpreted that, the immediate results of the election. But now these states here, just sending them out in mass, exactly. The voter rolls is one of the trickiest things in American electoral politics, because you got the rolls, you got power, okay?
And I think there's so many abuses that have now been exposed. And again, the media keeps saying, these allegations are baseless. No evidence. There's a lot of evidence. There are sworn affidavits. And incidentally, all the court rulings, they keep saying, the court rulings have all gone against Trump. The court rulings have not actually been about the actual substance of the claims. The court rulings have all been about standing, which is the usual kind of legal trickery when courts don't want to get involved. They say, well, you don't have standing, and then they throw the case out. But on the substance of the allegations, that no court has ruled. So they've not said that,
See,
that these are all unsubstantiated allegations.
but that's my point, is that the media can overlook it and rain down on it as saying it's not important. But these claims are being made and they're being collected.
Right.
And like I said, someone or some group of people are going to do a forensic study of just exactly what happened in these states. I mean, some states, got their voting done, as usual, no problems and all that. And then it's these battleground states where, okay, I suppose that's a coincidence, but I'm cynical, so are you. And I really want to stress here, I'm not making any claims, okay? Because I'm not there, I'm not seeing it myself. But there, a lot of other people are making claims, and people are making claims under oath.
There's a sworn affidavits. I mean, courts usually regard that as evidence. I mean, you can challenge it, but it's nonetheless evidence that courts have to consider.
George,
on affidavits.
But the die, it's been cast. Okay.
Well, that's right. Well, I think that's it. I mean,
meaning for tens of millions of people that think this was a rigged election. That's what I mean. And the more the media pushes back and saying this is staged, this is irrelevant, this is a poor losers, the more people are going to say, but what about this? And people have come on Crosstalk and told me that everyone in their house got a ballot. They didn't request it. I didn't get one, and I did request a ballot. I mean, these are personal stories you hear all the time, and this person doesn't have any skin in the game. So why would she tell me that? Okay, that story is going to be compounded over and over and over and over again. And what the media is doing, what the Biden orbit is doing, is the worst thing they could possibly do. They should be saying, we everybody lawyer up, let's find out, make sure everything is fine here, because we want our guy to be legitimate, not like your guy was illegitimate, okay?
No, I think that's right. And I think that when the courts rule in this very narrow legalistic way, which is you have no standing, people don't understand that. It's an argument that people don't understand. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you understand it, but if you say, well, these are voters who come along and complain that there's fraud going on, and they're told that they have no standing. Well, who the hell else does have standing when you're challenging an election other than voters? And so it's a weak argument, and therefore will indeed reinforce the impression that people will have that this was a fraud, this election was stolen. And that's not a good situation to be in.
Well, see, what it's going to do, and we've talked about it already at length here, as long as people have that lingering thought or anger, Trump remains very relevant to them. They see this whole process of denigrating the voter. We had voter shaming, now we have denigration of the voter. This is going to keep Trump buoyant, and he's unrepentant. I mean, he said that if he will agree to the decision of the electors, but he says, but it was I can't remember the exact term he used, but it was to the effect it was a rigged election. This was a battle.
No, that's absolutely going to be his line from January 20th onwards, and he will be the de facto leader of the Republican Party. So when you say that the Republicans will cave and will just sign off on cabinet officials, I think that they will cave on something. They can't keep caving on things. If with Trump standing there and really threatening these Republicans, saying, okay, you're going to cave, I'm going to primary you. I'm going to get Trumpian to primary you. So I think he's going to have that sway over the Republicans.
In principle, I agree with you, but on foreign policy, it's just so bipartisan.
I agree. No, foreign policy, no. Okay,
but I mean, will the Republicans? I mean, just tear a page from Newt Gingrich after Obama was elected. I mean, absolute obstruction. Oh yeah. I mean, I could see McConnell coming up with a lot of tricks. He has a lot of tricks in his bag to make things very, very difficult. And I'm pretty sure. I think it's a pretty good bet that the Republicans will maintain the Senate with the.
Right. But again, like if for instance, Biden says he's going to bring a kind of an immigration amnesty bill before Congress within his first 100 days. Now, there would be all sorts of Republicans like Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney who say, okay, yeah, that sounds good. You know, they've always been pro-amnesty Republicans. But they've got Trump now behind them. And Trump will threaten them. You vote for this, and I will have you primary. And I think
there's one other
that will
layer
have a
here.
powerful effect.
It's one other layer here that is very, very interesting, is that the razor thin majority the Republicans have in the House. And a lot of those, not a lot, but enough of a number of them are blue dogs, okay?
Right, no,
and they're looking at 2022,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
it'd probably be better to vote with the Republicans, or
I
meaning
think so.
vote
I mean, that
again.
exactly. No,
I mean, all you need is like 10.
right, absolutely.
Okay. And I mean, and believe me, there's going to be Republican strategists that are just going to laser focus in on those 10 congressional districts and just pound away at them. And so, you know, when it comes to these issues like immigration and something like that, there's going to be a lot, you know, they're going to be looking over both sides of their shoulders. Okay. They're going to say,
No,
we have to be careful on that. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is the worst Speaker of the House in my lifetime. Okay. And she really blew it, because you could say, yes, we still have the majority. No, you in numbers you have the majority, but in power you don't. Okay,
that's
McCarthy will be able
to.
McCarthy will use his whips,
right,
not against Republican Democrats.
That's the point, because normally, let's say you know, you get a presidential election, the president of your party wins, you get a nice bump in your majority in the House. And that will be a kind of a cushion against the inevitable swing against you in the midterms. She doesn't get the bump. She has no cushion. She knows that they're going to be wiped out in 2022. So therefore, she's now under a lot of pressure from the Democrats, who are terrified of losing their jobs in 2 years' time. So this was indeed a humiliating defeat for her. And no one is even saying to her, or you know, telling her that your impeachment strategy and your attempt to just sabotage anything to do with Trump, you know, down to your little childish antics of ripping up his State of Union speech, have been an absolute disaster for the Democrats. Your entire strategy has been a disaster. But you know, nobody seems to say that. Yeah, exactly, that little thing, exactly. Yeah, all of that.
No, it's the Republican Party it should feel very satisfied with itself here. I mean, I have to admit, I'm astounded by the turnout about the outcome for the House. I'm astounded by it. I mean, they were like they got 27 for 27, and there's still a couple more out there. I mean, this is any speaker's worst nightmare, because I mean, the Republicans will be using their whips against their against the members of the Democratic Party. They don't have to use them against their own party. It's going to be very, very interesting. Right. So. You know, the ability for Biden to deliver anything substantial is.
Oh, I agree, but I think that's why the nightmare will be that he will focus on foreign policy, because foreign policy, you're not answerable to anybody. You can just do what you like, and you don't have to go to Congress, other than occasionally brief them and tell them, well, this is the way it's going to be, and shut up and stop complaining. So yeah, I mean, so yes, on domestic policy, I don't think he's going to be able to achieve. Yeah, but that means you have a blank check when it comes to foreign policy.
Yeah, but I'm just very curious on what the reaction is going to be, because I'm serious, because you know it was an issue in 2016, and in
the election. But I mean, I think that's right. But I mean, let's say he comes along and says we've got to deal with Assad. Oh, we've got to renew the war against Assad. Okay, how much resistance is he going to meet? He'll meet some, but I doubt whether it'll be that intense. I mean,
well, it's going to be.
If there's a risk, however, if there's a risk of a confrontation with Russia in Syria, I think that may be a little different. People might get nervous about that, but there's no constituency for Assad here, so why not?
Yeah. Well, just because it was determinative in 2016, and we weren't allowed to have a campaign this time around. There's still public opinion out there that's quite strong against this, and I'm going to be very curious to see how they're going to finesse it. I mean, obviously they're going to lie. Okay, that's what they do best. Okay, but I'll be very interested to see how they do it, because their internal polls have to have informed them that, they have to step gingerly. I mean, they talk the talk. Okay, they're big talk. I mean, and and that's what these people do. They do more talking than anything else. All right, my red line. Well, that meant nothing. Okay, I mean, you know,
Well,
so
I think it was supposed to mean something. They meant nothing because Obama didn't think that the UK Parliament would vote against it. I mean, it was I think they were all set to go to bomb Syria in 2013, but suddenly the UK Parliament just said no, no, we're not with this. And then I think Obama got cold feet. He really didn't want to go do it all by himself. And then Putin kind of saved him with that face-saving formula of the chemical weapons. But yeah, I mean the red line. I mean, I think that was the objective was to get America in, and that's why Obama drew it. It was. He was it's such a terrible president, but we can.
I mean, but, yeah, okay, but it's kind of interesting. I think you're absolutely right on domestic issues. It's going to be just a dead heat, okay, and it'll be executive orders and things like that. But if they want to hang their hat on foreign policy, I think they have to do it at their great peril.
Yeah,
Because these are not popular things. Okay,
no,
obviously, like I said, they won't have to sell it. The media will, but the trust in the media now is about zip. Okay, so it's going to be very interesting if they try that. Okay, you
yeah,
you may be right. They may have no other choice because all other doors will be closed.
exactly.
Okay.
What else are you going to do? And you're right. I mean, it's an interesting issue because with the media, back in again going back to Yugoslavia, you could pull that off. It wasn't popular. It was not popular to start bombing a European country, but the media just drummed it into, oh God, we're going to stop Milosevic, so on. And the public was eventually
I,
persuaded. You can't do
I
that anymore with the internet and the democratization of the media. It's not. You can't pull that stunt again.
I've often thought if RT and Al Jazeera and Press TV had existed when they were targeting Yugoslavia, if the
Oh,
receptions
I think it
would
would
have
have been
been
very different.
different,
Would
okay?
have been very
And I
different.
think they would have been, and I think that's really, really interesting. I'll make an admission here, George. I took hook, line, and sinker the whole propaganda about Yugoslavia. I did for the longest time until I actually started reading books like yours and other experts, and I just realized how much I'd been hoodwinked. And that was actually a meaningful moment, a benchmark in my life, is that everything they told us was a lie.
Yes. Yeah. That exactly, and that's and including the characters who have now made their slimy comeback, like Anthony Blinken. Just one other thumbs up is the Supreme Court ruling this week, the 5-4 ruling, which prohibited Governor Cuomo from discriminating against religious institutions. I mean, it wasn't a wholly big, significant decision. I mean, they didn't say that religious institutions should be treated specially. They just simply said you can't discriminate against it. You can't say, yes, you can go to bicycle stores and go buy alcohol and so on, but you can't have more than 25% or whatever capacity for churches. And I think that was it was an intelligent ruling. The Supreme Court hasn't yet touched the big one, whether do governors have this power to shut entire economies down just off their own bat without any legislative enforcement. But it's also nice that Roberts is now no longer the swing vote. He's sort of lost his significance with Barrett being there. He's now becoming an irrelevance.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned it, because it certainly is a thumbs up here. This ruling by fiat, it has to come to an end, and the media is the the weapon. They're the cudgel to intimidate and cow people so much. I mean, it's very, very important. I mean, if you're not a religious person, maybe you think this is really frivolous, but when you think about it during economic downturns and a pandemic, a lot of people need to turn to something. And if it's their faith, then God help them and God bless them. Okay. And this whole attack on religion by the left is just so disquieting to me. It's you know the secularism that they promote is so empty and vacuous. It doesn't make anyone happy. Okay, and if it's abortion clinics and booze that make you happy, then that tells you where we are as a society.
Okay. That's absolutely right. Well, that was the thumbs up and thumbs downs of the week. Next week we'll be at it again, and so I hope that people will start trembling between now
And in the
and then.
comments, tell us what
Yes,
you like,
exactly. Yeah,
what you
please,
focus on.
yeah. In your comments, suggest any thumbs ups and thumbs downs of your own. What we may have missed, and we'll be sure to mention them if they if they're really good ones. So please do that. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.